Hello and welcome back to My Surrogacy Journey, the podcast. This is season 3 and the only brand new podcast designed to help you navigate surrogacy. How are you all doing? We're back for another incredible episode and you're going to really enjoy this one.
Hello, how are you doing today? Well, I'm Michael, I'm Wes's better half and we're dads to 2 children via UK surrogacy ourselves. We're back in the studio and thank you for downloading us again. Have you managed to subscribe? No? Come on, well, make sure you do.
Season 3 has been in the making for almost a year and we're excited to be back recording it just for you. We even have a sponsor. Tell us more about it, Michael.
So Manchester Fertility is a leading fertility clinic with over 35 years experience, building families for people within the LGBTQ plus community too. With an established heritage and excellent success rates, they provide many fertility treatments and pathways for same-sex couples, single trans people, non-binary people and heterosexual couples from across the UK. Manchester Fertility are well known for their fantastic team of experts who provide the best patient care.
Today we're talking to 3 amazing, in brackets, crazy ladies from Irish Families Through Surrogacy who have their own personal stories to tell of their surrogacy journey. Ciara, Sinead, Cathy founded Irish Families Through Surrogacy to campaign for surrogacy legislation, and they've done a ton more work in helping people navigate through their surrogacy journeys.
We're also incredibly honoured to be joined by Senator Mary Seery Kearney.
Well done.
Yeah, I've been practicing that so much. Who is not only the Fine Gael senator and party spokesperson on children, disability, equality and integration and youth, but also a leading advocate for the provision of legal framework to ensure that both intended parents have full, long life relationships and legal relationships with their children. And yes, she's also the mother of a child born through surrogacy and has an intimate knowledge of this form of assisted human reproduction. So this is going to be a good one. Hello, ladies.
Hello. Wow, there's so much talent in this room about helping people navigate through their surrogacy journey. Let's start, Ciara. Just give us a quick intro.
Hi guys, and thanks for having me today. Delighted to have a chat with you. So my journey that led myself and my husband Michael to have our twins through surrogacy started in probably about 2014 and a few years before that. So we got married in 2008 and tried to, like many couples do, you start trying to have a family. Unfortunately, we had a couple of miscarriages and then I had a condition that caused basically the cells in my uterus to turn cancerous. So I had to have a hysterectomy in 2014. So obviously this led to then an inability to carry my own child. So we started our journey probably about 2015 and we started looking at surrogacy in India at the time. Mm-hmm. But as you're aware, India is now closed for international surrogacy journeys. And we then started to research other options. And for us, Ukraine was the best option. It had a legal framework and we spent some time, went over and visited the clinics. I'm a nurse by background, so I went over with, like what we would say in Ireland, a HICWA hat on, and made sure that all the standards were absolutely there. So we were really, really happy with our choice. And so we started off and we had a couple of miscarriages, unfortunately, at that point. We had, I think, 3 in total, and there were heartbeats there. But then when we went to scan again at 9 weeks, unfortunately, we lost babies. It was hard, I'd say. From my point of view, I was like, let's just keep going. My husband had to kind of really consider it because it was like heartbreak each time. And then there was also financial cost to it as well. I think men probably more focus on the financial aspects of things than the women do. But he said, okay, let's just go one more time, throw the kitchen sink at it, so to speak. And we had 2 embryos there that looked okay. And we had to make a decision about whether you transfer 1 or 2 embryos. And we decided at the time to talk to other people that had been through the process, which I think is really important that you do always talk to people who have been through the process. And a set of prayers and transferred 2 embryos at the time. And in August 2018, Matthew and Clara, our twins, a little girl and little boy, were born in Lviv, and they were carried by the most amazing woman called Lydia.
Oh, you gave me goosebumps.
Yeah. So they're now 4.5, well, nearly 5, and they're starting school in September.
I love that age as well.
Yes, they're hilarious.
It's such a fun age.
Everything is what and why, and you can't watch a movie in peace anymore. They're asking 1,000 questions. So
I suppose I am an only child, and my journey began in recognising when I was 12. From the moment that it became apparent that womanhood was going to have its trials and tribulations, I started having problems. And my mother had taken a number of years before she eventually had a child, and she had to have intervention. So they were a long time waiting for me. So once problems arose with me, but just normal problems, nothing that was going to say I wasn't going to be able to carry a pregnancy to full term. But I knew throughout my teens, was in and out of hospital throughout my teens. In my 20s, I never became pregnant accidentally. It just never happened. And then I met my husband, and we talked about the possibility that it was going to be a difficulty given my history, but my undiagnosed issues, but given my history. So we started IVF very quickly after we got married, just to boost any opportunity we had. And we started procedures first and then went into IVFs very quickly. And unfortunately, I wasn't ever able to carry a baby to full term. I had 5 miscarriages, and they were horrifying. We sat down and did a plan based on that you get somewhere between 25 and 30% of an outcome. And we thought, well, we need to do every clinic 3 or 4 times. So we charted a plan, and we started in an Irish clinic, then moved to another Irish clinic. Then we went to Barcelona. We tried the States. And unfortunately, in none of this arose to me being able to carry a pregnancy. And then we gave up based on how my mental health was, my concerns. So I took time out and studied law. And in the year that I was called to the bar, the Minister for Justice published guidelines on surrogacy and what was needed for surrogacy. And David and I had spoken about it beforehand over a number of years. And he kept saying, why aren't we trying surrogacy? And I thought that surrogacy was something that only very rich people could do. I thought it was unattainable. I'd seen Elton John and been madly envious. But I thought, there are Hollywood actresses. You heard about people like that doing surrogacy. I hadn't really heard about normal people doing surrogacy, everyday people doing surrogacy. And we were self-employed. When I lie awake at night thinking, is this my lot? Will I ever hold my baby? I would go Googling to see, is there any changes? I wouldn't go on the boards because they just always told horror stories of IVFs. And I felt I had to insulate myself from other people's tragedies. I had enough of my own tragedy to carry. So we went and investigated. We first took a journey to Ukraine, and unfortunately hit with the wrong clinic and made what I thought were informed choices, but not meant to be. We handed over a big wad of money and felt conned in actual fact, and probably were. And then unfortunately there was no Irish Families Through Surrogacy at that point, so I had nobody to turn to. And then a programme aired, Her Body, Our Babies, of a couple in the west of Ireland who had a journey to India. I had worked in India. My husband was had been CEO of a British and Irish organisation that had worked in India. So we had people to ask and people to check out and to see, is this okay? Is this clinic going to be okay? And we went out in 2014. They transferred 2 embryos that looked fantastic, and for a while we were going to be the mother and father of twins. And unfortunately we lost the second baby at 10 weeks. And but we went on to have the most magnificent little girl that we called Scarlett. And we called her Scarlett after Scarlett O'Hara, because every time I was emotionally on my knees, I would say, tomorrow is another day. And we promised, somewhere in my soul, I knew I was going to have a baby girl. And we have a baby girl. And then in 2019, I got the opportunity. I was asked by Fine Gael, which you pronounced fantastically. I was asked to run for the local elections, and that was a great success. And I was elected, and then I was appointed to the Seanad. And I had the opportunity all of a sudden to be at national politics and to start advocating for the legal rights around surrogacy, which no doubt we'll get to later on.
We absolutely will.
What an amazing platform, though, and how much of an impact you can make having lived experience. That is something that I think not everyone is able to have, and that is going to make a massive difference, I think, to the support and the change you can make.
Yeah, I think there's nothing like having people in the room who have the empathy of the journey and the challenges, the heartbreak, and you speak from a place of integrity and empathy because you know what it's like. It's very hard if you haven't encountered this journey. I think, as you know yourselves, I think it's very hard to describe it and to describe how difficult it is to have that birth of your baby in someone else's hands. And you know, I played with dolls as a little girl. I hoped to always be a mammy. I hoped that maybe I'd just strike lucky and it would work. And then to have that place where, okay, it didn't work out quite the way I had planned or hoped, but here I am and I'm inside the room and inside the tent and, you know, have access to ministers and access to the Taoiseach, you know, and have had incredible support from them. And they knew what they were getting into. I was always very young. So they knew that I was going to advocate and have a lot to say about it. But
good. And, you know, surrogacy changes all of our lives, doesn't it? From the moment that you are then blessed with having that ending to what you dreamed of, it then changes the landscape of how you engage with surrogacy and what you want to advocate for and how you want to help. I know it certainly has with us. And
I mean, never for a second did I think I'd be sat in a podcast studio in Ireland speaking to amazing people about surrogacy. That just wasn't how I thought my life was going to pan out. And I think none of us thought we'd be sat here today. But here we are. And you guys are all making some amazing change. Thank you for your story. Cathy, let's hear yours.
So I'm Cathy, married to Keith. We got married in 2013 and decided quickly, because of my past history of endometriosis, that we wanted to try and start our family straight away. By the time we got married, I'd had 6 surgeries for endometriosis. And so I remember the doctor saying to me, look, if you're going to do it, you need to do it now. And I just never believed that it would work, because I suppose when you're growing up, as Mary had said, you know, knowing that you have a medical condition that could affect your fertility, you just try and protect yourself by believing that there's another step that you can go to. And if it doesn't work naturally, you can do IVF. And I think that's where then people find themselves. We did IVF and it didn't work. Then going the next step, which for us was surrogacy. But I suppose to rewind a little bit, I'd had the 6 operations by that point and tried for a baby. We got married in June 2013. We moved into our little renovated cottage Christmas 2013, and I found out I was pregnant with baby Helen naturally that same year. So I'll never forget ever celebrating that Christmas, because I had everything I ever dreamed of at that time. And so I was lucky enough to be pregnant. I was lucky enough to carry a baby. I was privileged enough to know what that feels like, to feel my baby move inside and kick me. And you just think, that's the hard bit done. We're pregnant. That's it. You get to the milestones. You pass 12 weeks. You pass 20 weeks. And you think, that's it. But life had other high days. And unfortunately for us, when I was 7 months pregnant, I had a spontaneous uterine rupture. I lost 5 litres of blood and I lost my baby girl. And so baby Helen was stillborn. I lost her at birth. At that point, I didn't just lose her. I lost so much more as well. I lost my ability to carry any future children. And I lost all my hopes and dreams. And at that point, life didn't seem worth living. I would never have imagined a time that I would ever feel like I didn't want to go on living. But honestly, right there and then, I didn't want to live. I didn't want to live without my baby. And I didn't want to live without being a mother to a child in the future. And so that led us to where we had to make decisions. And I suppose, like the ladies have said previously, you know, I remember 6 weeks after Helen died, the consultant said to me, the chances of you carrying another child are very slim. But he didn't say it wasn't possible. And to somebody like me, when he says they're very slim, but he doesn't completely rule it out, I go, no, that's grand. We're going to go for this. It's going to work. It's going to be fine. And so we went to the IVF clinics. We went to 3 rounds of IVF. Every time got perfectly grade A embryos, and we implanted them into my uterus. And I look back now and I'm so mad at myself, because it was eventually the doctor said to me, you are implanting perfect embryos into effectively what's a war zone in your uterus, because it was fighting to be able to carry that pregnancy. And so every IVF was unsuccessful. At that point, then you just think, oh, and the doctor said to me, surrogacy is the only way you're going to have a child. And I couldn't comprehend that I could have a child that I didn't carry. It just didn't equate to me. Having experienced carrying baby Helen and having the privilege of that and feeling what that was like, I just didn't think that I could ever trust somebody else to do that for me. We still weren't over. We actually got pregnant naturally again. And unfortunately, that pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. And that was the point that I just thought, this isn't ever going to work. And if I don't do something, then I won't have a reason. Because all I've ever wanted to be is a mother. And I know that sounds cliched to people, or, but to me, that was my biggest dream. Anything else, even if I was president of Ireland, it wouldn't compare to being a mother. And so I always wanted that. And I was lucky enough that when I married Keith, I found somebody who was willing to be dragged along into the process. My husband's very quiet. He's not like me at all, but he very much wanted a family as well. And so when we started to look at surrogacy, and again, like the girls, I remember doing a Google search, and Baby Ava's story, her book came up, and I ordered it straight away and read it, and it was about India at the time. And then the documentary aired, Her Body, Our Babies. I remember watching that and watching Fiona on that and just thinking, she's just an ordinary girl. She's just they're ordinary families. They're like us. People are doing this. And at that point, being able to show my husband that and him to think, okay, this is something that can be done, because I think I always believe the impossible and dream the impossible dream and do all of that. But he'd be, I suppose, a little more refined in thinking whether or not it can work. And so we went to the doctor that we had used here in Ireland. She said to me, are you going to go ahead with surrogacy? And I said, yeah. And she said, okay, I'm from Ukraine and we have one of the best surrogacy protections at the moment, and look into going there. And she gave me the name of the clinic where she had worked. And so I didn't look anywhere else. I suppose I was a bit like, I have a doctor here who I trust. She was the only one who actually told me straight, this is not going to work. You are not going to be able to carry a pregnancy. And so when she then gave me the advice that she did, we just went to where she said, and that was Lviv again, where Ciara's twins were born, and the clinic there. I did my stimulation here. I remember doing the injections and everything and going, okay, this is brilliant. And then getting on a flight to fly over there and feeling like I was going to explode on the plane, even though physically you can't see anything. But to me, I thought like my stomach was huge with these little eggs that were growing in it. But unfortunately, when they did the egg collection, we didn't get any eggs. And this was the very first time out of all the IVFs that we didn't get any eggs. And it was a shock. It was a huge shock. And I was devastated. But thankfully, the same doctor had prepared me at that point and said to me, look, if it gets to the point that you're not able to use your own eggs on this journey, she said, I need you to start considering donor eggs now and how you would feel about that. And I'm forever grateful to Luda for doing that, because she gave me the heads up, basically. I think she knew at that point the way that things were going. And I kind of missed my chances with the little embryos that we implanted into me. And so when I came round from egg collection, there were no eggs. And the lead doctor came down and spoke to me and said, do you want to do donor egg? And the answer was no. I didn't want to do donor egg. I desperately didn't want to do donor egg. I wanted to have a biological child with my husband. That was both of ours. But there and then I knew it wasn't going to work. And so I had a choice to make. What did I want more? Did I want a family? Or did I want my DNA? And the truth is I wanted a family. And so I made the choice to use donor eggs and to go ahead with that. And we were really, really lucky. Now it's the best decision I ever made. And I look back at who I was then and think you need to kick up the bum, because, it's absolutely the best decision I ever made. So we did donor eggs. We met our wonderful surrogate, Ivana. We implanted 2 grade A embryos into Ivana. And Ivana told me from the very beginning, this will be twins. And I said, everything had never worked for us. So I was so negative throughout the whole journey. And then when we got the results and the HCG results came in and they were really high, it was like, oh, maybe she's right. Maybe it is twins. And then my husband was like, what? Maybe it's twins. And it was a very, very different situation to be in. But thankfully it was. And the pregnancy progressed fantastically. And we had boy-girl twins, baby Ted and baby Elsie, born in November 2019. And they are, without a shadow of a doubt, no matter what their genetics are, their DNA or anything, they are the children I was meant to have.
Absolutely.
And I am so forever grateful for that.
Oh my gosh. What a journey.
What an amazing story. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And it's over to you, my lovely, last but by no means least.
Hi, I'm Sinead and I'm married to Mark. So myself and Mark got married in 2015. We've been together since 2009 and Mark had a previous relationship and had a little girl. So when I met Mark, Ella was 15 months old. Kind of early on, we had decided that we'd kind of like a sibling for Ella, kind of close enough, I suppose, in age. So we looked kind of when Ella was about 5, maybe, of, progressing our family. But unfortunately, I got really sick. I basically, actually, when I'd met Mark, I had a knee injury from playing sports. And unfortunately, I got huge complications from it. So I ended up in hospital for an awful long time. And I nearly lost my leg and I had sepsis twice in my life. I nearly lost as well. So for a number of years, I kind of had battled that big journey. And I thought that was my biggest battle, but unfortunately it wasn't. Because as the others have said, kind of all I ever wanted to be was a mother. So for me, being faced with fertility issues was a bigger battle than probably fighting for my life in hospital and fighting for my leg. Early on, kind of like we tried for a couple of years before we got married to conceive naturally, and it just hadn't happened. But at that point, we weren't too worried. But deep down, I kind of had a feeling that things weren't going to work out, kind of how we'd looked at it. Soon after, kind of we got married, I'd said to Mark, I said, I'm not waiting any longer. I said, I'm going to go and get tested. And Mark thought I was mad. And so did my GP. They were like, I'll give it time. And I said, no, I've given it enough time. I just knew deep down there was something. So off I went, I think 2 months maybe after I got married, and in to get testing done, and nothing showed up. The clinic I actually engaged with first in Dublin told me like they could see nothing wrong, and they actually didn't even suggest IVF at the start. I was doing IUIs. I did about 3 cycles of those before I was progressed on to IVF. And then you're being spun out your percentages of chances, even 90% of chance of getting pregnant, and sure, you're believing all of it. But it just didn't happen. So they progressed me on to IVF, and in the end, we decided we'd go elsewhere. So off we went to another clinic in Dublin, and we did a number of cycles there. It didn't work out. We'd kind of had a couple of miscarriages, and we then started looking at going outside Ireland. So we went off to Gennet in Prague. And we found them really, really good. They kind of like discovered I had endometriosis, and I had an element of polycystic syndrome as well. But I'd had kind of a procedure back in Dublin at the time, and they just burnt off the endometriosis. That was traditionally what was done back then. Things have moved on obviously since then, but that was what was done. And again, they felt it was kind of an immune issue as well as what else I had, that I was attacking the embryos. I was seen as a foreign object and I was attacking my embryos. So yeah, we had our last kind of miscarriage, say, in November 2019, and I was just at breaking point at that stage, just crying and crying after I'd lost that baby in the shower. And I just said to Mark, I can't do it anymore. Like, I think I'd gone through 14 rounds, I think, of IVF at that stage. And like, that was on the back of battling 4 or 5 years in the hospital. So it just taken its toll. I felt like I spent years fighting and I just couldn't do it. So I said to Mark, I'm going to just do a bit of research, and off I went with my big head on me and researched the surrogacy. And like I'd said before, like, you know, the one thing that was kind of made me doubt whether I'd go through surrogacy was the fact that I wouldn't be a legal mother to the child that would be born. So that was like, I remember crying. I was like, why wouldn't my country recognise me as a mother? And then I was like, I'm not going to let anyone tell me like that I can't have my family. So I just said to Mark, I said, these are the facts. I was like, I need to do a little bit more research. So off I went and did a bit more research. And at the time, it was I was the Google mother at the time. Like, I wasn't aware of Irish families through surrogacy at that stage. To be honest, I wasn't really aware of anybody. I wasn't in contact with anybody. I didn't feel like there was anybody really talking about it back then in Ireland openly. Like, I know Cathy had actually been on the Virgin Media
documentary,
but I actually hadn't seen it. You know, like, it was very much in the background back then. So I just did my bit of research, and then I engaged with my solicitor and engaged then obviously with a number of different clinics over in the Ukraine. And we obviously chose the Ukraine because of the legal framework that was in place. And yeah, we got a good sense from the clinic that we actually went ahead with. So just there was an awful lot more protections for my surrogate, which is important to me, that she'd be carrying my child. So we went over in the January of 2020, and we initially we didn't have Jana, our surrogate. We had been given a different surrogate, and the first time it was cancelled actually because COVID had just broken out in 2020. That January, wasn't it? January, February.
Right.
So they actually cancelled it because there was restrictions in place. There was shutdowns in different zones in Kiev. So it was cancelled, I think, 2 days before we were due to transfer. So that was a bit heartbreaking. And then they re-stimulated her again when things had started to open up. I think it was a couple of months later, and unfortunately that had to be cancelled because her endometrium wasn't at the right level. So that was another kind of setback for us. And then we went on to have our surrogate Jana, who actually carried Theo first. We transferred 2 embryos at the time, and we were expecting Theo, our son. And yeah, the pregnancy went really, really well. From her point, she was pretty healthy throughout it, and no complications. And then we welcomed our little boy Theo into the world. Yeah, so that's kind of been our story. But I've actually been very, very fortunate, and I know how fortunate I am, especially when I'm sitting here with you guys. I went on to have a twin pregnancy myself, and I know I'm very lucky, and I don't. I know I find it actually hard talking about it because I've had to go down surrogacy, but initially, but I just firmly believe Theo is my reason that those twins are here, because that pressure from the last number of years was taken away. Like, he's a very special little boy to me. I actually had different treatment for my endometriosis. Different things happened. I ended up getting a new consultant, and this new consultant said to me, he sat me down, he said, Sinead, why haven't you been able to carry? And I said, answer me that question. I don't know. I said, I've had to go down surrogacy, and I have a little boy, and he's like a couple of months at home, and he just said, well, I'm going to do something different. And instead of them burning away the endometriosis, which he felt he said it never solves the issue. The same issues are there, for the embryo not to be able to grow. He said, I'm going to scalpel it away. And I had extensive endometriosis all over my pelvic organs. And I think I lay in bed for a week, and Theo was only a few weeks old. After that surgery, it was horrific. But in the end, he said to me, 6 months now, go over. And I had a couple of embryos left in Prague that we hadn't used. And I went back to my original clinic over there, and we went on to have twins, a boy and a girl. So Theo has twin siblings that there's 14 months between them. So it's one of those
You're a warrior, can I just say? There's just absolutely.
Yeah. And it was a difficult pregnancy. It was I was in hospital for huge periods of time. But when I was away from Theo, which was really, really sad, because I had kind of an overriding guilt. I hadn't carried Theo, and I was carrying the twins, and my little boy was at home. Now, he's well looked after, and I used to get out most days to see him and stuff like that. The hospital were really supportive, but at the same time, I felt like I was being taken away from him again, But everything happens for a reason, doesn't it?
Totally. Totally.
Life just throws different curveballs at you, and you got to just ride it.
And then when
keep
that
strong.
happened, you found all of us as well. Because we saw you and we were like, oh!
Yeah, so like I've got like a different like support network, and people, like I would never have had people around me that would have been down this route, that you can communicate with, you can bounce different things. You're like I was speaking Cathy going, Cathy, do you feel like this? And she's like, yep, that's normal. Like, do you know, like just to be able to bounce things off each other, like that's what it's about. It's that support network, and what's different now to when, like a few years ago, we all have all this support network around us. You know,
it turns out that myself and Sinead literally lived 1 kilometre from each other. So I went out to see her then when they arrived back to Ireland with Theo.
Yeah. And we actually went to the same secondary school. Would you believe
we
it?
did.
We're different years.
Yeah, just different years.
How crazy.
A little bit older, but
but it just shows you like how many people are around you that you don't even realise.
You don't even realise.
You don't realise.
We have the very same conversation about. You don't realise how many people are touched and impacted by surrogacy, and until you lift that lid and you start talking about it, and you soon see that this is not the taboo topic that we all used to think it was. This is a form of building families, and perfectly acceptable.
Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you,
That was, you know, hearing all of your stories, and all of them amazing in their own rights, is how resilient you all are, and how connected you are with your partners. That really comes across in all of your stories. And also, you know, surrogacy isn't always the rainbows and unicorns that people think it is. You know, both of you two experience loss within the surrogate as well. So it's never just the perfect destination or the perfect answer, is it? You might get there eventually, but I think sometimes people think that's it. We're going to sort it out. We're just going to get, but there can still be loss there. There can still be challenges. It's never a perfect solution.
Absolutely. I always advise people that it still carries the risk of any normal pregnancy. So you can have miscarriages, or it mightn't work. I think you feel sometimes like you're on a ladder and you're like, right, 1 month up the first step, 2 months up the next step, you know. But there's absolutely, you know, you have to consider that it's just any normal pregnancy. It's not a magic solution.
No.
I think it's a very important message, Wes, you know, that it does carry all those risks, as does any pregnancy, and then you have an IVF element of it, and then an unknown element, and it's difficult when you're not feeling the pregnancy yourself. So I think getting prepared mentally for that reality with any couple embracing surrogacy, that needs to be said, that needs to be told.
How do you manage that sort of emotional, psychological element? Because I know how we managed it, and you know, and I'm obviously that's going to be very different. But what type of support was around you managing your journey?
Well, we were always very open about it. I'm a wicked stepmother, well, not so wicked. I have 3 stepchildren. And so we brought them with us. They're adults. I'm 9 years older than my eldest stepson. My husband and his first wife got married when they were teenagers. We were just always very open. But the problem of that was that then when there were losses, you had to emotionally carry them in the loss and take responsibility for the fact that they were grieving with you and they were sad with you. And I found that tough. But Dave and I used to just go on long drives. At the time we lived in Kildare when we were at the height of our IVFs. And we were 2 hours from Kinsale in Cork, because it's a really good road there. And we'd drive down, go for lunch in Kinsale and drive back and probably cry, sing our songs. I'd play Immortality by Celine Dion till it was worn out. And we'd have particular moments of Michael Bublé's "I Just Haven't Met You Yet" was the first time I heard that, I had to pull in the car and cry my eyes out when I heard it on the radio, thinking, you know, I will meet you, I just haven't met you yet. And so we just talked to death. And the poor fella, my poor man, no wonder he's no hair left. He's burned off his head from listening to me, you know, and we just did. And sometimes in your worst moment, the longest pregnancy I had, that it was over Christmas on New Year's Eve, we got the word that there was no heartbeat and that I was going to literally miscarry over the next few days. And And yet I look back on that time, and it was the worst of times, and he thought I would die. He really did. He removed anything that I could take my own life with from the house, because he was terrified of what he would come home when he'd go out to the shop or anything like that. He was terrified of what he would come home to. And I thought I was quite together. But yet, in our moments of holding each other, of crying, of being honest and being witty, and I wore his boxer shorts. We carried each other through it. So I think that in our most vulnerable moment, we were closest, and there's a depth between us that I don't know that we would have ever had. Not that I would willingly embrace that again, but that said, it is remarkable. So you do, because you love each other and you talk about it and you're open about it. And
I think our partners in the situation, like, we're Irish families through surrogacy, and it's just happens to be all the mammies that are out there fighting. We have some same-sex couples with us, obviously, but in terms of our partners and our husbands, what they have had to carry is even more than what our surrogates have had to carry, in a way, because I feel like my husband had to deal with the fact that I wasn't going to carry our baby. It was very difficult for him. I remember when Ivana was pregnant and the babies would kick, and she was so like giving, and she'd automatically go to grab her hands to touch the bump, and I could see my husband freeze, and he didn't want to touch another woman's body. And it was very difficult in that situation for him to get his head around the fact that this was happening. And then also you have the situation whereby, some people know we live in a small little village in rural Wicklow, and, stupid questions would be asked, you know what I mean? And I feel like my husband carried the emotional burden of pregnancy, surrogacy, loss, all of those things. I think he did that because I just kept going, and you get tunnel vision, and you just want to keep going, and you want to stay strong, and you want to do all of those things. And so I really feel like, in a way, like with baby loss or anything like that, it's the partners who don't really get a voice a lot of the time, who carry the emotional load and have to deal with things that are never what they dreamed of. And so in that regard, I think, like Mary was saying, to be able to do that. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not all mills and boons and roses and all of that. Like, but
mills and boons, that takes me back.
Do you remember that?
I not that I've ever read a mills and boons. My mum used to.
Loving a good love story, and but you know what I mean. Like, and so like at those times, I think you realise that that's what love is about. It's about support. It's not about the big gestures or the romance. That's all lovely, of course, but it's about people carrying you through.
At your most vulnerable.
At your most vulnerable.
When you're ugly crying, and when, you're having that meltdown, and things haven't worked out the way you thought building a family was going to be.
And it's, I would always say, Ivana carried our babies, but Keith carried me through the process. And I'll just forever be grateful for that.
Yeah, the importance of that emotional support, and those are the people that are next to us is super, super precious.
We are 22 years married this year, and we, on our wedding day, we wrote our own vows, and our vows were that we would carry each other's dreams. And every year on our wedding anniversary, we say our vows to each other. We hold each other's hand and look into our eyes and say, I still carry your dreams. And in the years when it was hard, they were really important words to say to each other. And I praised, and we would say, I would say, am I worth it? Is this okay? Is this okay for us to go through? And he would always say, of course it is. This is our dream. This is our life. This is what we promised each other. If it's not going to work out, and if we're not going to carry our baby together, we will look back and know we did absolutely everything we could to make our dreams come true. And I think that's really, having that honesty all the time and checking in that it's okay all the time.
I think you're right though, Mary, in terms of the guilt that you feel.
Yeah.
Isn't it, ladies?
Yeah,
it's
I think we've all carried it, but I think the men carry it in a different sense, probably for a lot of us. Yeah, I think there's always one partner that carries probably a little bit different. Yeah, and I suppose they've looked at us go through well, in our circumstances, a lot of us have
worst.
gone the fertility route as well.
Yeah.
So it hasn't just been, I suppose, one road. Like, it's been like a number of years of collateral damage basically built up. And yeah, and I certainly think in my mind, when I was offered the surrogacy, even though I should have known better, because definitely when I embarked on IVF and fertility initially, I definitely had this sense of believing the 90% chance I'd be pregnant and the baby be there. And again, I got drawn into it with the surrogacy. It was a new hope, fresh hope. It was totally different. I hadn't gone through. It felt like I was starting all over again. And I definitely had that whole thing of, if it's not me carrying it, it's definitely going to happen. And that's not reality. Like, I should have known it was going to be another roller coaster. But I suppose having people around us now, like with like Irish Families Through Surrogacy and the other coalition groups, like they like LGBT are out there. There's Equality for Children, Irish Gay Dads. Like that's where you can communicate with people who have lived experiences. People are talking about it. Like so, people that have gone through it can warn those that are only starting out the journey. This is what you should expect.
Totally.
Don't set your expectations that just because you're not carrying this baby that there's going to be a different outcome. You're going to experience the exact same roller coaster, and it's a roller coaster. But I suppose I didn't have anyone to talk to, and so I just assumed it was going to be Rosie in the garden.
I think we all thought that
definitely.
at the time,
I was like, yep, this is going to solve the problem, and you're just on a different roller coaster.
Yeah.
You've just switched, haven't you?
And the biggest thing is that you don't actually have control over it. Like, you're not the one injecting. It's very hard to detach yourself when you've gone through all of that in the past. It's another roller coaster, just a different roller coaster.
Let your control go, don't you?
It's so hard.
Like, you don't even know, kind of. I remember thinking, I wonder if she's eating broccoli. I don't know why I had this obsession with broccoli, but it was one thing that just kept coming to my mind. I wonder what she's eating. I hope she's eating broccoli.
Ivana definitely ate loads of broccoli. Ched and Elsie would just eat a plate of broccoli. And it's amazing that you can laugh at those things afterwards.
Totally.
You know what I mean? But at the time, you have no control. And especially in my situation, for me, what I found really difficult was obviously after baby Helen dying, and it was due to failures in care in the hospital, unfortunately. And so I had this really, I don't know, I didn't breathe. None of us breathed, but I didn't breathe because I didn't trust the professionals anymore.
Yeah.
And so in actual fact, the person who I trusted was Ivana, and it was really important for me, and we now have a lovely close relationship, but that's why it was really important for me to be able to build that relationship with her based on that. And our relationship is not the norm, and it's, sometimes it doesn't happen like that, but I think the reassurance that she gave me, because I didn't trust anybody, but actually I had no choice but to trust Ivana. She was carrying my babies, and she reassured me so much. And it was coming up to Helen's anniversary, and every year we have an event called Helen's Day to raise money for the Stillbirth and Neonatal Association of Ireland. And we were announcing that we were pregnant through surrogacy. And I remember the night before not sleeping, because I thought, if I announce this now, tomorrow we could find out that there's no babies there anymore, there's no heartbeats. And I texted Ivana and I said, how was everything? And she said, you're no sleep. And I was like, no. And I told her why. And I didn't say anything else. I just said, I'm really worried about this. And all her family were coming to the house at 2:00. And at 1:45, I got sent a scan picture. She had gone off and got in her local area, gone off and got a scan, paid for it herself out of her own pocket to reassure me that our babies were still there, and to be able to make the announcement. She said, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to enjoy this day. So if I can do one little thing to make you enjoy it, then we will. And it was just
amazing women.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable. Like, sometimes you can never fully put into words what it's like to have another woman carry your baby. And you can never fully put into words. I don't even know. I'm never stuck for words, lads.
I think we're establishing that.
And even I can't put it into words. Anyway.
You've all had to manage a journey. Talk to me about how you manage other people's expectations, and how open were you all about your journeys? Because this can be a really difficult piece, can't it? Particularly when there's announcements and then potentially loss. How did you manage that? It's a really private thing, isn't it? And it's not for everyone.
And we kind of kept it within the family for a couple of months, I would say. My sister, my mum, they were really good supports. I had a very good friend as well who actually took baby Ava's book and went off to read it so that she could understand what we would be going through as well. And she said that helped her to be able to support me. I guess once we were a couple of months in and we kind of believed that, this is really going to happen, I quite enjoyed showing people the scan pictures of two. I didn't tell them there was two. I was like, look at the picture, But at that point, I was quite open about my journey, and I think people were extremely supportive of it, particularly where I worked. I worked in that big hospital in Dublin at the time, and everybody knew that this was happening. My staff had a big baby shower for me as a surprise. Walked in mortified, and I don't like being centre of attention, so I was mortified, but they had a big baby shower for me. So from that point of view, it went really, really well. And then on personal life as well, we had a baby shower, and I hadn't told anybody the sex of the babies either, so we kept that to ourselves until they were born. And so there was great guessing going on at the baby shower. So I felt like talking about it really helped. My husband probably the same. He chatted to his mates about it, and interesting the conversations that would happen, over a pint or whatever. Some of his friends actually opened up, and actually one of his friends that also has gone on to have twins through surrogacy since as well because of our journey. So
wow, powerful.
Senator Mary.
I suppose my first apprehension was going to my parents and saying, look, we're going to go down this surrogacy route. I wasn't sure how they would receive it. I was a little apprehensive. My father would be quite a person of faith. So I thought, oh gosh, is he going to have a problem with this? And yet they'd never reacted to IVF. They were only ever encouraging and supportive. But when I went in, they were saying, well, we wondered why you hadn't done that before now. So that was their response, much to my surprise. My stepchildren, we told as well that we were embarking on the journey. So they knew why we were going to India. And then we said nothing until we hit that 12-week mark. And the first phone call I made was to my stepchildren's mother to tell her that she was going to have the turn of being a wicked stepmother, sort of. And she was fantastic. And then we rang my husband's mother. We hadn't told them. And part of that was, gosh, have you not been through enough? You felt that there was a wall of people who didn't want to hear a tragedy anymore.
Yeah. Because they were protecting you as well.
Yeah, and they had cried with me. They had done all of that. So I suppose from that point of view, I was apprehensive. But I wanted to reach a point of knowing it was going to be good news. So in some instances, we waited until the 16-week scan and everything was spot on and fantastic before we told others. And then we were on a roll. We just were totally open. Dave shared photographs of the scan and everything with everybody in our life. Was very proud and thrilled and excited. We waited till 20 weeks to buy a pram or buy anything. We just, I wanted to wait until I was in the second half and counting down. We did a big baby shower. There were I think 60 odd people in our house, and everyone was very excited. And she is still perceived as being that very special little baby, special little girl. Her, people ask for her, look for photographs of her, chat to people in our lives, have a great interest in her, and she is in everybody's life. So I think by being very open, but like that, maybe as we touched on before, you are carrying that emotional expectation of other people and the fears of other people. And two things I loathe was, one, have you not had enough, and maybe it's not for you. And then what's for you won't pass you. If another person said that to me, I would happily have decked them because I felt, oh God, just don't do that to me.
It's just not helpful.
We've got to live our journey in our life together as a couple. But it was great. It was great. And I haven't ever, until in public life, you get the odd email. And I mean, in politics, you get a lot of emails that tell you what they think of you. But I've only had the odd email of people who maybe if I've had 5 of an outright thinking this is terrible. You'll get a few, the usual typical ones on social media that we've all had, or a couple of comments to me, but nothing. No, I've never really had a negative experience, and maybe it is the joy. The joy, people are delighted for you because, well, you come with a backstory to it. But I would like to think that actually we've moved to a place of really believing that people should follow. We have assisted human reproduction. This is another means of that. And actually the joy of, and the natural desire to be a parent is just so amazing and so special. And people share in that magnetic energy and love. And it's love in its purest form.
I'm really enjoying this podcast, I'm not going to lie.
Cathy, let's hear yours. Come on.
Okay, so mine was a little bit different, of course, because it wasn't just enough for me to do it. But we actually went to a surrogacy event that was being hosted by Annette Hickey, Surrogacy Solicitors. And whilst we were there, unbeknownst to us, I was chatting to some of the other people and telling them our story. And we were then approached by a producer of a documentary who said that they wanted to shine a light on surrogacy and to update the original information that had been given at the time before. At this stage, India had closed, and what people were doing now and where they were going. And so they asked us, would we consider letting them follow our journey? And of course I was like, oh yeah. And my husband's like, no way, not in a million years, no. And they were like, oh, okay, no problem. And then they said, can we just take your number anyway? And I said, okay, no problem. And then about 3 weeks later, I got a call and she said, look, if we don't get a couple to follow, then this documentary is not going to go ahead. And you told us that one of the reasons why you thought surrogacy was accessible to you was because you saw a documentary on TV. And can you imagine how many people would maybe feel the same if they saw ye? And so I went back to Keith with that, and he was like,
oh, she's good.
Yeah, isn't she?
She's good. She got you right where that hurts.
Yeah, Zlata's her name. She's a friend of mine now.
But she was right though, wasn't she?
She was 100% right. And still to this day, in a weird sort of a way, the reason why we're friends is because at the time that we hadn't told, I mean, our families knew, but we hadn't told other people we were doing it. This film crew were with us and they became the people who celebrated our joys and were with us for when we found out the blood results and all of those things. And in particular, Katie and Zlata, the camera woman and the producer, were absolutely our friends and shared in the ups and downs with us. And so pretty soon, maybe before we would have wanted to, the local community, obviously, they saw us with a camera crew, something's going on. Obviously, we started to tell people of the process, not the actual in and outs that we were even pregnant at that point, just that we were doing surrogacy and they were doing a documentary on it. So that was the first stage of that. My family, my mum, oh my goodness. My mum is the type of woman who you don't tell her you can't do something because she will prove you wrong. And so whenever anybody said to her, oh, do you think she can do this? Do you think they can do this? She was like, yes, they can. How dare you? Of course they can. And so the documentary people actually loved my mum. She ended up being in it more than we did. She was amazing. And I remember her saying, they asked what would it be like? What could we envisage life to be like when we had our children, our twins at this point? And my mum said, it will be beautiful pandemonium. And it was, and it is, and it was perfect in what she said.
Description.
It was exactly what it is. And so, yeah, we had, I suppose, supportive people that we didn't know, but became our friends at that point. And then, of course, we had a lot of support through Féileacán, the Stillbirth and Neonatal Association, because you go to these events and every year you go, the next year, people who've lost babies at the same time of you or babies have died, you go, they have a rainbow baby, and this rainbow baby thing that people talk about, and you just think, I'm never going to, not everyone gets a rainbow baby, you know, and that's the reality of it. Mm-hmm. And so we used to go to these and continually year on year just feel like, oh, it's never going to work for us. And I remember telling them that we were going to do surrogacy and we got so much support from them, and everybody was so involved in cherishing us, because a pregnancy after a loss anyway is fraught with huge emotion. A surrogacy pregnancy after a loss is a whole other kettle of fish, because like Ciara and the lad said, the control element is gone and you have to trust somebody. And so throughout the whole journey, I think one of the things that struck us was when Ted and Elsie were born, they were given to us, and I remember just shouting over and over, they're alive, Keith, gosh. They're alive. And to me, it was like, I couldn't believe that these two babies were alive. And baby Helen, my little girl who died, I would always say sent them to us. And I was so absolutely grateful for the fact that they lived. And so the support we had was amazing, and we were very lucky, but it was unusual with the film crew, I have to say.
Let's hear you, Sinead.
Yeah, so I would have been probably very different to everyone else. We definitely kept it between ourselves, and that was partly because, like I had spoken before, like during my knee journey, I felt like a bit of my identity was lost. So anytime I met somebody, it was all about how's the knee. It was never about like, how are you, Sinead? Like, it was just always the knee. And I actually never told people, apart from my mum and a couple of close friends, that I was actually doing fertility treatment, IVF treatments. I didn't want to carry everyone else, and I suppose I had learned from previous experience with my knee, and I just said to Mark, I said, no, private, that's how I'll be able to deal with it better. And that's, I suppose, what worked for us. And yeah, so we actually didn't tell anyone apart from my mum. As soon as I found out my result for Theo, I rang my mum, and I couldn't even talk on the phone. But anyway, she came, we were actually down in Wexford, and she came down and we told her. But she was literally the only one that knew up until we were 18 weeks pregnant. And that at that stage, the only reason we had told kind of immediate family was because there was 2 genetic tests done on baby Theo, and it was the second lot of tests. Before I just said to Mark I couldn't go there and tell someone we were expecting, and then for something to show up in those tests that would rule out kind of a viable pregnancy. So yeah, we waited until we had that 17-week scan and the results from the genetic testing, and we told Ella, actually she would have been the first apart from my mum. So we told her she was going to be a big sister.
And how did she take it?
You know what? Like, I was expecting, like, in my own head, I was like, oh, we're going to be asked a million questions here. I was thinking, how is, like, a little kid of her age going to be able to, like, comprehend it? Because, like, a lot of people, like, Mark didn't even know the ins and outs. I didn't even know. So I was like, how is this little girl going to go do it? Like, I remember sitting her down, and I was like, we'd done, like, a little picture of Theo on one of his scans, on his latest scan, and on the top of it, I got engraved on a little frame, will you be my big sister? And I gave her that. I just sat her down and I said, now, Ella, I was like, I have something to tell you. And I was like, nearly shaking. And I was like, I just need to explain. Like, so this baby isn't grown inside me. I was trying to, she's like, I was like, so it's a thing called surrogacy. Oh, don't worry about it, Sinead. I've seen a program on it. And I think it was the one that you were on. So, like, I had this, like, kid tell me, she's like, I know all about it. I've watched the thing, so it's grand. You don't need to go in and explain it all. And yeah, so she was totally fine about it. But like, I didn't even go on the call with Mark's family to tell them, because they hadn't even known we were on like a fertility journey. Like, there was always questions and stuff from everybody, but it was never something I answered because I just thought it was a very private question, and
yeah,
like
for sure.
Family and friends like be asking you or whatever, but just adds to the pressure. And yeah, so Mark told his family, and then I went on at the end because like, you just didn't know how like they'd receive it, and especially because they didn't know we were struggling with fertility. They may have, I don't know, like, but we certainly hadn't discussed it with people. And my dad was totally like in another world with the whole thing. I remember saying to him, my mum's like, "Oh, ring your dad, but like, Sinead, he might react like really bad." And I was like, not really bad, but just not have a clue. And he was like, I remember telling him, I was like, "Oh, yeah, you're going to be a granddad." And he was like, "Oh, that's amazing. I'm so happy you're pregnant." And I was like, "Well, no, actually, I'm not pregnant." And I had to ring him because I don't know why. I don't even think I could sit down with him at the time.
You were, yeah.
I was just so nervous. And like, he was like, Sinead, but like, is that even legal? Is like that not child trafficking? And I was like, child trafficking? No, Dad, it's not. It's legal, totally legal. It's all safe. I'm not like going down that road. And like, I remember my like grandaunt turning around going like, when she heard what my dad's reaction, she was like, and she's like in her 90s, and she was like, is he for real? Like, does he not understand any of this? Like,
funnily,
and
yeah,
you know, like, and
like
she was like the older generation that totally got it. Like, but we only kept it to like close family. Like immediate family, like a little bit of the wider family, but just close friends.
We are just privileged to be able to sit and listen to your stories, and an absolute in awe of your strength and determination and how you've all approached, you know, the journey to build your family, and how you're all now trailblazing to make change and support people better. It's just...
he's getting all emo.
It is, though. We hear lots of stories, but it's been a real privilege to sit here and listen to your stories, all of them with adversity, but it's really touching because you're all just doing amazing things. So thank you for letting us listen.
Thank you for letting us share it. You know, I think that the normality, but the humanity, you know, and we've all welled up at some point over the last time. But and whether you keep it tight and a secret, or you are completely open about it, there actually is no right way to go about this. No. But what it is having a baby, which is completely normal.
Exactly.
It is. And it's about doing what's right for you.
Yes.
You and your network and how you want to kind of navigate through it, because there is no right or wrong way.
Not at all.
But it's got to be what's right for you. So there's one more question.
This is final words for Senator Mary.
No pressure.
Hopes for the future of surrogacy in Ireland.
The hopes for the future. Well, I hope the day comes when any couple, regardless of their makeup, when they sit down and they're on that first date or 10 dates in or whatever, and they say, well, we have a family, that there is no bars to them having a family, that there is a legal framework for both of them to be the parents equal in Irish law. I hope that that's very close. I really do. I think that Ireland has been very progressive. We have made decisions as a state that were very mature and inclusive. And I think that we need to make now this next step that removes there's almost, in the absence of law, it leaves a place where there is stigma and there is shame and judgment. And no couple following their heart to have a baby should have to feel that. And we feel that sometimes in the way that we're spoken to, or we have to. Ciara was particularly fantastic during the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Surrogacy, because when she expressed her heart and her parenting, she highlighted the fact that all of us feel we have to be best in class. You know, you have to, before I speak about surrogacy, I have to acknowledge all the vulnerabilities in it, acknowledge that I'm aware of these things, and then get to the point, which is actually the midwife was the only other person to hold my little girl when she was born. She handed her to me and to my arms. And I knew in my soul she was going to be a girl before ever I met her. We did, in India, they don't allow the gender of the child to be known prior to birth. So we had no idea, but we couldn't come up with a boy's name. We could only figure on a girl. And it wasn't, I would have been very grateful of whatever baby I was handled, whether it was boy or girl, whoever I was handed. But from that moment, we were parents. The public health nurse, when she visited our house, asked me, you know, and how are you? And I said, well, I didn't give birth, so I'm fine. Of course I'm fine. And she held my hand and said, no, actually, how are you? And I broke down crying because I was acknowledged. And that fear in Ireland that I'm not acknowledged, that I have signed. I know I confess I signed myself as mother to a lot of forms. I wasn't as honest as these guys before I became a public figure. And then once I went out in public, I thought, better sign myself as guardian now. Because I used to think it's nobody's business but mine, and how dare anybody challenge it, and how, you know, I went from that sort of place and thought, okay, I'm going to be honest about the legal situation. So I don't want, in the future, I don't want any family to face that sense of running the gauntlet of judgment and shame, that somehow, you know, life hands you whatever it hands you, but it brings with it a heart that wants to hold your own child, and I want that to be easy. Those mums, those second dads, they all deserve to have that legal security. No man really wants to hold the power of the biological dads. No man really wants to. There's a few god-awful men out there who wield it, but there's the vast majority, the 99%, our husbands, the partners that we know, they really want to share it. They're embarrassed, just like Cathy's husband, they're embarrassed that we're not equal. So my hope is we will be equal. We will be very soon.
What an amazing way to end. Thank you.
Ladies, I feel I'm drained. This has been beautiful, and thank you for sharing. You are all just
amazing people. Thank you.
Admiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
And continue doing the
Thanks for
amazing
having
work
us.
you're doing.
Yeah.
We will.
Continue.
Oh, we will.
Oh, I have no doubt. I have no doubt to that.
Thanks ever so much, ladies. All the best.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye-bye. So don't forget, if you need your podcast fix, we're back every Monday, proudly sponsored by Manchester Fertility, the UK's leading specialist offering IUI, ICSI and IVF treatments, awarded Best Fertility Clinic in the northwest of England.
If you want to find out more about My Surrogacy Journey, then head over to our website, which is mysurrogacyjourney.com, or find us on Instagram at official My Surrogacy Journey.
If you like this episode, then please subscribe to the series and we will have another episode coming out next week. Thank you for listening. We have been your My Surrogacy Journey podcast hosts. Goodbye.
Goodbye.